Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Summer Market Performance Report for Summer Readiness, August 2023, brought to you by the Market Performance and Advanced Analytics for the California ISO. On behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs Group, my name is Brenda Corona, and we welcome you to this call early morning today, Monday, as we will be discussing on the August report that is currently located on the monthly market performance reports, as well the miscellaneous landing page. The ISO regularly reports on performances of its markets and provides timely and relevant information. So this is the second customized monthly report that focuses on the ISO market performance and system conditions during the summer months, when system conditions are particularly constrained throughout the California and Western interconnection. So we have a presentation here available, and we will be going over a few housekeeping reminders as this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. We welcome any questions and comments, and also please provide any comments for us. We will be available to answer those hopefully today with this call. The instructions to ask a question is to use the raise hand icon located in the lower toolbar, located in the middle lower screen. This will allow us to know who has a question. Please state your full name and affiliation so we can make sure who's speaking. Feel free to submit questions to us through chat. We'll do our very best to answer the chat questions. Be sure to add your affiliation as well if it's not listed on your title. So just for those who are also new to WebEx, we do have the WebEx that does lock your WebEx tools when you want to ask a question. So if you're asking a question, if you are raising your hand, do not unmute yourself until my event producer, Adrian, unmutes you. So we will make sure you have any technical difficulties. We'll make sure you have those questions answered. At this time, I'll go ahead and introduce Guillermo, who'll be helping go through the next few slides, and then we'll come back and do a recap. But other than that, we thank so much for everyone for joining us. Go ahead, Guillermo.
Thank you, Brenda, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. This is the third report that we provide for the summer conditions of 2023. Just to give you the context of this effort, and we started doing this with the summer 2021 as a follow-up to the initiative of the summer 2021 readiness effort, in which we implemented different policy enhancements to ensure that our markets, our systems were better prepared to handle the summer conditions where we experience typically supply-tight events. And we have been reporting those for every summer since then. We go from June through September. That is typically the period where we could be more exposed to these summer conditions. And similar to previous years, we have been reporting this every month, and this is for the month of August. Now, I would say overall, the performance for this summer has been relatively quiet, and we are glad with that. There was a lot of activity for the emergency conditions that we experienced in the second half of July, and we have reported that in detail in the July report. For this standard report of August, we really don't have any special item to discuss in more depth. This is the very standard metrics that we have used for the summer report. And along that line, given the fact that conditions were mild in August and they were even milder in the month of September, we are not expecting to generate a report for September. It was completely uneventful. It was indeed quite mild when you see the supply conditions that we experienced. Therefore, we're going to skip the month of September, and we will resume the effort for the next summer, for the summer 2024. With that, I think we have some material to go through the conditions of August. Again, the general idea here is that August in general was quite moderate. The demands were relatively moderate, nothing to do with what we saw last year when we broke the record, slightly higher than what we saw in July. And that condition speaks to the dynamics that we saw in the market. First, we didn't have any emergencies during the month of August, and The only 2-3 days where we start to see some level of tightness was in the period of August 15, 16, and to some extent the 17. These are actually 2 days where we observe under supply conditions in the day-ahead market, meaning our residual unit commitment process was projecting to have tight conditions and reduce and also specific exports, and we were projecting to be on, short of supply once we accounted for the ROC adjustment. That ROC adjustment, you may recall, also has to do with accounting for uncertainty related to weather materialized in load, wind, solar changes. We didn't have any scarcity pricing trigger in the month of August, concurrent with the undersupply conditions of August 15 and 16. We also experienced some reductions of exports. They were low priority exports, some economical exports in the day-ahead market. And when we go into the real time, we didn't have the need to economically or forcefully dispatch reliability demand responses. If you see any activity for demand response, even for reliability demand response, that was because of the participation, the economical participation they have from the day-ahead market. And the last piece that is also of interest for these conditions is regarding the wheel-through transactions. For the month of August, we didn't see any reductions for high priority wheel-through transactions in the day-ahead or the real-time market. And overall, these are the main points that typically have been of interest for participants to gauge how things are working when it comes to tight supply conditions. Adrian, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, let me pass it to Amber because the whole thing of how nice August was had to do really with the dynamics of the weather. Amber, can you?
Yep, I'll take over a little bit on the weather side. Good morning, everybody. I hope all is well. Taking a little bit of a time warp back to August, some of the things that we saw on the temperature side, which really, of course, drive the demand during the summer season, is that overall we actually saw in California first. We saw that the Northern California area did see, average, much above average temperatures during the month of August. That was really concentrated towards, the Bay Area as well as far northern California. And then that led into the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest also had above average temperatures for the month of August, with some of the areas having some of their record warmest temperatures and also much above temperatures. And I'll get into a little bit of the timing that those events happened. For the rest of the West, in Nevada, even in Southern California, we did see below average, much below average temperatures, as well as above average temperatures. A lot of thanks to that, to the remnants of the hurricane that worked its way through during that August time period. The Desert Southwest, in most of its realms, still remained much warmer, with record warmest, much above average, and average temperatures. These, of course, are focused on the mean, so this is the average of the whole day. And when you dive into it a little bit more in the maximums, the maximum temperatures were above normal in the Bay Area, the Pacific Northwest, right along the coast, as well as in the Desert Southwest. A wider spread area saw minimum temperatures departing from average, and those also really focused around the Pacific Northwest into the central region and the Desert Southwest for August. Talking about a few specific events, August 16th, of course, was where CAISO hit the peak load for the year, which will be on the next slide. But some of the Desert Southwest, they saw some of their warmest periods that beginning part of August, and then as well as in the last week of August time period, where you saw, for SRP, for example, they averaged about 3.2 degrees above normal for the month of August, where El Paso averaged 4.5 degrees above normal. For the Pacific Northwest, that big warm period that you see really driving their temperatures in August was coming from the period of time for Portland area, from the 11th of August all the way through the 21st of August, where they were anywhere between 2 to 20 degrees above normal. And then Northwestern Energy saw the warm period coinciding with that too, really from August 14th through the 18th, where they got to see up to 14 degrees above normal. So that's really what's kind of under the hood of all of the averages for the month when we look into some specific examples. So with that, I'll pass it back to Guillermo to talk a little bit more about the loads.
Thank you, Amber. Adrian, next slide, please. Okay, the rest of the deck, you are going to see that we are capturing the standard metrics, and we try to focus on the elements that historically have been of interest to participants given all the changes that we have implemented. And one of those has to do with how well positioned the CAISO system was to handle the levels of demand that we have. As Amber indicated, August happens to be the month where we experience the peak of the year. We can say that safely now. And even if you look at that, it was in the range of 44,000 megawatts. And when you compare that against the RA shown capacity, or the capacity that was indeed available, we have enough room to be able to meet that total load obligation that is not just the load, but also the obligation to meet our operating reserves. And when you look at the trend for the peak, for instance, in the lower part plot, you can see that there is plenty of room available to meet that level of demand. For a reference, you may recall back in the summer 2023, our peak reached 52,000 megawatts, and that is when we really were using every single megawatt available in the system. Next slide, please. When it comes to the composition of the array fleet, there are always movements, ups and downs. Sorry, there is a typo here. It should be August values. And here you have the composition of the resource adequacy fleet and how it compares to the same month of the previous year. There was marginal increases in gas. Gladly, we also saw an increase on hydro given the conditions that we have better for this year. There was a significant increase relative to previous year for storage, and in this case, we're really referring to the batteries. And imports is also seen an incremental improvement. So here the main note is the additional capacity that was provided by the additional storage resources that we have in the system. And as you may see later, and also in the report, you can see how significant the additional supply from storage resources have been into the system. And this is good news to have, to be able to account for that extra capacity that could be available for the peaking conditions that we need. Next slide, please. Hydro. We also keep track of hydro because it's a good complement to the renewable resources that we have. And given the drought conditions that we have experienced for years, we are always looking into how much capacity we can get out of these resources. With the healthy snowpack and the precipitation that we observed earlier in the year, we did see a significant improvement in terms of the capacity supply provided by hydro resources. If you do just a simple comparison relative to previous years, same time of the year, we saw that hydro increased by 63% between August 2022 and this August. And when you see the outlet profile in the lower part, you can see that hydro tends to provide the power typically for the peaking conditions, that is really when it's most needed. That was a good outcome to have for this summer, concurrent with the additional capacity from storage resources. Next slide, please. Prices. And when we are looking for tight supply conditions, naturally prices tend to rise, meeting the expectation of that tightness. For August, that was not the exception. We did see prices increasing mostly during the most critical times of the month that happens to be during the peak time, around August 15, 16, and 17. Here you can see the prices raising over $1,000 in some cases, and this was specific to this narrow period of tightest supply conditions. For the rest of the month, you can see the prices collapse, and they were relatively in a very short price band. And we start to see other prices courses towards the end of the month, but the most significant one was related to the period of the peak condition in the middle of August. And here you can also have the reference of the prices that we had back in the emergency conditions of July. And these were mostly reflected in the real-time prices in the lower part of the plot, because as you may recall, the emergency conditions transpired directly into the real-time market. There was not much from the day ahead. So this is a good expectation to see the prices signaling the tightness of the supply as we reach the peak conditions of the year. Next slide, please. When we go specifically to the most critical days, August 15 through the 17th, and we do an assessment of how much capacity was available to be able to meet the expected load obligation. This is a very standard metric that we have considered in the past, and it has different pieces of information. The portion in blue, the area in blue, accounts for all the resource adequacy capacity. The portion in green stands for any capacity that is either non-array capacity or above the array level. So all that area is accounting for the supply that is available in the system. It has an hourly profile because we account for that. We estimate that on an hourly basis, accounting for not only what is bid in, but also what is actually available once we account for the rates, outages, and other types of limitations. So this is the most realistic view of the supply that is actually available to be able to meet the forecasted load conditions. Now, there are three trends in here. One that is the lowest in purple, that is just the standard load forecast plus the amount of requirements we have for operating reserves. That is about 6% of the load forecast. When you compare that purple trend against the shaded area even in blue, we can see that there was enough array capacity to meet our load obligation. The next trend that is in blue is the same load forecast plus operating reserves plus the ROC adjustment that we consider in the day-ahead market for weather-based uncertainty. And for these days, we may have seen uncertainty in the range of 4,000 megawatts. So once you account for that, you can see that we start to go into the area in green. That means we would require to dispatch non-array capacity as well to be able to meet overall our load obligation. Now, let me caveat that statement because it's not that we just sequentially dispatch first all the array capacity and then the non-array. Everything is based on prices, wherever the economics dictate. It doesn't have to be sequentially. But the point here is capacity-wise, we would have to require both array and non-array to be able to meet that level of demand. Now, keep in mind, the ROC adjustment is an adjustment to consider the uncertainty that may or may not realize in the real-time market. And the last piece is adopted gray trend. That accounts for all what the purple and the blue accounts for, but also estimates what will be the condition if we were in the need or in the position to meet all the self-scheduled exports, either high priority or low priority, as long as they are self-scheduled. And in that case, you can see that there are cases such as August 15 and 16, where even accounting for all the capacity that is available, there is not enough supply to be able to meet all the exports that bid in the market. And that explains why the ROC process, that is the reliability process, couldn't meet all the exports that, even if they were clear in the integrated forward market, the financial market, they have to be reduced once we go into clearing against the load obligation. And that's the reason you can see that for these 2 days, we were infeasible in the ROC process, but also we have to reduce to a certain extent the amount of exports that could be cleared in the day-ahead market. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting trend, and we have provided also this through the different reports. And this one highlights a very interesting trend in terms of the dynamics of the net interchange. This has all the components that make up the net interchange. It has the static import, the specific resource import that are the dynamic resources. It also accounts for the capacity associated with wheels, either imports or exports that happen to be the same amount, and also the exports. And also the net, that would be just the algebraic difference of these positives, minuses, gives you the black trend, that is the net interchange. And a few things you can highlight from this. If we just take aside the wheels, because they are not adding or subtracting capacity, just a wheel through, but overall they balance out. We have relatively stable levels of imports, static and dynamic, and there is more dynamic conditions for the amount of exports. And you can see the negative side of this trend, where you have these areas in green standing for the static exports. They are first quite dynamic. They are not just holding constant through the 2 months of July and August, but they tend to change quite rapidly from day to day. And they tend to be the highest when we experience these events of July, but also in the peaking conditions of August 14, 16, and even 17, to the point that our net interchange for these days happened to be negative. That means the total exports were greater than the total imports coming in, and that is what we have a negative net interchange. These are quite dynamic conditions, and to some extent reflect the overall dynamics that happen not only in the CAISO area, but across the West, where other balancing areas were experiencing these high demand historical levels, to the point that there was additional demand for meeting these exports. Next slide, please. And this is kind of more surgical view of the exports to get a sense out of these thousands of exports, where they are coming, what type of exports they are bidding for. And the dominant color here is the dark green, and that belongs to the day-ahead low priority exports. These are exports that are taking a position of price takers. They are willing to pay any price for the sake of clearing that megawatt. They do not have any non-array resource support in that export. It's simply a economical position they are taking, and they can do it either through the day ahead or direct into the real time. If they take that position straight from the day ahead market, and if they are able to clear in the day ahead market, then they can come into the real time, and they will have a slightly higher priority than any self-scale price taker exports coming directly into the real time. They still will have lower priority than day-ahead priority or real-time high priority exports or EPCs, just because they do not have, again, that non-array resource support in that specific transaction. And when the market is tight, like in August 15 and 16, the market is going to follow, generally speaking, the sequencing to reduce that type of exports, starting from not awarding the economical exports and then reducing the real-time low priorities. If there is still a need to balance the system, the market starts going into reducing the day-ahead low priority exports. Granted, there may be some locational factors that may not render that natural sequence to happen all the time, but in principle, that is expectation to follow through. And with that, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, I think we can take a question, Brenda. I saw a hand raised now.
Okay, let's go get Sam Johnson. Please make sure to introduce yourself. Thank you. I think we lost Sam's audio, so we'll come back to him, Guillermo, until he gets his audio back connected. So yeah, I can tell that he lost his connection. Yeah, sounds good.
That's right. Following the discussion of the exports, these are two pictures of complementary information. One, we have these relatively higher levels of demand. We have these great levels of exports. The market specifically for August 15 and 16 first was infeasible to be able to meet all that supply ROC adjustment for uncertainty plus all the exports. And that is the reason that you can see in the lower part of the plot two instances where the market was infeasible in the undersupply direction, up to about 3,000 megawatts for the August 16 trade date. And in a complementary view, you can see the upper side of the plot where we have the reductions of exports in the day-ahead process, that is the ROC process specifically. And in some cases, that level of reductions reaching over 5,000 megawatts. That was the level of balancing that has to be done in the day-ahead market to be able to meet all these load obligations plus ROC adjustments plus the exports. The conditions of other days, like towards the end of August or middle of July, are in a more moderate level. In some cases, you may see that blue portion that stands for economical reductions. And these are economical exports bidding in at a given price to clear in the market. They may have cleared in the integrated forward market. Once we go into the ROC process, they may be the first ones to be reduced if there are tight supply conditions. Okay, I think Sam is back. Maybe we can take his question now.
Oh, his audio just dropped again. I think I asked Sam just to type his question in just in case, because it keeps dropping.
Okay, yeah, we can move on. Next slide, again. Another area regarding the conditions of the market has to do with the will-through transactions. As we have explained in the past, the will-through transactions do not add or subtract capacity to the system, to the CAISO area. They are a pass-through. They balance each other with the import and the export leg. It is only when there are either limited capacity on the interties where they are coming from, or there is internal congestion on Path 26, where there may be conditions to determine the trade-off between clearing the level of will-through transactions versus other transactions, including imports that may be used to serve CAISO load. We didn't have those conditions in August, and there were no will-through transactions reduced in the month of August. The table on the left-hand side stands for all the registered wills that get granted high priority condition when they go into the market. And for the month of August, indeed, there was a very good utilization of these registered high priority will-through transactions. Out of the 1,700 megawatts, up to 1,200 megawatts were actually used in the market. And there is an item that we pointed out back in July, and that is there are two steps in the process to ensure that those that are first registered and approved to be high priority will-through transactions have to complement that with a second step, and that is to bid in properly into the day ahead and the real-time market by following specific ways to define their transactions. Specific to the month of July, what we observed is that even though some transactions were properly registered and approved to have this high priority condition, when it came to the bidding of the day ahead market, the corresponding scheduling coordinator didn't properly utilize the features of the system. Therefore, even though they were registered as high priority, they were actually bidding as low priority. And specific to July, when these were considered or treated as low priority and we were with these tight conditions, they were indeed reduced specifically for the days of the emergencies on July 25th. That was the outcome of the improper bidding and utilization of the high priority condition for those wheels through. The market worked properly because once they were in the market, they were considered as low priority given how they were bidding. We have tried to do some educational outreach to those entities that we identified to be not using properly the bidding feature so that this could be mitigated moving forward. For the month of August, we didn't see any reductions, and therefore I think that would be a potentially moot point if they didn't bid properly for August as well. Next slide, please. Another area has to do with the performance of resource adequacy imports, and this is very surgical for those that are static imports for the assessment hours for weekdays. And we have tracked this performance in previous reports. And what we see for this month of August is not atypical. I would say that generally speaking, the vast majority of the RA imports are bidding as expected at either 0 or below 0 into the market, including self-schedules. And if you see here at the dominant blue area, that stands for basically self-schedules or prices that are negative to ensure that they are making themselves readily available into the market. By having these self-schedules, they are guaranteed to be dispatched first, unless there are conditions of congestion in the system. So overall, for the month of August, we saw effectively all the RA static imports to be effectively in that condition. It was basically 99-point-something%. A very small fraction didn't bid as expected. And once they were bid into the market, you can see also the dotted line that is a dark dotted line. Sorry, it is a dark gray line, the award. They were basically awarded at that same level. They were fully utilized. Next slide, please. Changing topics, storage resources. You can see that relative to the previous year, we have continued to see an increase of capacity coming from storage resources. They continue to participate actively, not only in the energy market, but also in the ancillary service market, dominantly in the regulation up and down market. They capture a good share of the regulation requirements, and it's good to see how that capacity is being utilized in the market. When it comes to energy, for the month of August, there was indeed a couple of cases where storage resources reached up to 4,000 megawatts of supply discharge. And that typically happens as expected during the most critical time of the day, that is around the net load peak, out in the 19, 20, depending on the time of the year. Next slide, please. We have also expanded that to account for the picture of the hybrids. And the hybrids is this storage resource plus other type of technology. And you can see that the main pattern you can observe is mimicking the profile of the solar. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, you can see that the stretched towards basically the end of the day, while solar may just be all the way throughout ending 19. And that is precisely because of the storage capacity allows for that stretching of the supply available and dispatched from hybrid resources. And they indeed also carry some level of regulation, as you can see in the lower part, both regulation up and regulation down. Next slide, please. Cost is also a factor that we always keep track of to ensure that we realize the implications of the different conditions in the market when it comes to the overall wholesale cost. This is one of the versions that you can see in the report and accounts for the total daily cost of the market. And the dotted trend stands for the average cost once you divide that by basically the demand of the system. Keep in mind, these are very preliminary numbers because they are based on settlements, and some of those are within a very close neighborhood of the trading date, so they are going to be subject to reassessment once we go into the next natural cycle of settlements. But that still gives you some reference on where the costs are going. And not surprisingly, we can see that for the critical period of the peaking conditions, August 15, 16, even 17, is when we saw the highest cost for the month. And in terms of the daily total cost, it was almost $250 million, a little bit over that for the month, for the date of August 16. And on average, the daily cost for the month of August was about $60 million. If you take, for instance, as a reference, the report of September 2022, when we have over, I believe, $300 million when we experienced the most critical days, these are still relatively moderate level of cost commensurate to the conditions that we experienced for the month of August. Next slide, please. And the last piece, and this is a new feature that we introduced in this summer, and is part of the continuous enhancement that we have for the resource efficiency evaluation. This is a feature implemented in August, and that allows different balancing areas, including the CAISO, to opt in for assistant energy transfer. And when an entity opts in, and it happens to face the test, now into the real-time market, they can still have the opportunity to leverage on the transfers, and there are settlement implications for that. This plot is only telling the instances in which the different balancing areas, and so far we have seen 5 different balancing areas using it, how they opted in for the month of August. And we have Avangrid and Nevada opting in for basically the whole month of August. We have PNM that opted in for mostly the last days of the month. And the CAISO that also sporadically opted in based on the projected conditions that it expected to face. The report also contains some information about the settlement implications, how much it has cost to those entities for opting in for those days. Again, this is only material when they have opted in, plus there is an active failure of the test. If there is no failure, effectively the opt-in has no implications just because it doesn't trigger the second part of the logic. And I believe this is the last slide. Operator, can we check if there is any other slide next?
This is the last slide, Guillermo.
Okay. Well, as expected, this month, again, has been quite moderate and quiet relative to the activity that we have seen in the previous years and even just last month, in the month of July. And therefore, there is really not much to report or any very exciting things to report. I think that's all the material that we have. I think it will be good time now to have any questions participants may have before we move to the last part, Brenda.
Yes, we did get Sam Johnson from PG&E to submit his questions in chat. I do have like maybe 4 questions from him. We can start on slide 16. Adrian, if you can move to slide 16. He asked, do you have any more insight into the large surge for the 260 million for the 16th? So last month,
Yeah,
the EA events, the CAISO only hit about 105.
yeah. I think it's the next slide. Can we move forward 1 slide, please? Or actually 2 more. He's referring to the cost, right? The wholesale cost. Adrian, can we go to slide number 18, please? Yeah, this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously there are different dimensions to this. One has to do with the level of demand, right? This reflects the total wholesale cost, and it depends primarily in 2 factors. One is the level of demand. You have higher demand, you have to settle that higher level of demand. And then the concurrent prices. If you have higher or lower prices, that is going to directly impact the level of the settlement that you have. If you put the 2 pieces together for these critical days of August 14, 15, 16, and even the 17, you have higher levels of demand settled at higher prices. That would be the basic premise of why we tend to see higher costs for this level of conditions. There may be other factors such as the Bitcoin recovery, the real-time congestion offset, the real-time energy offset, and I believe in the report we put some breakdown of that to give an extra level of granularity to gauge where these costs are coming from. In at least the MPPF that we have covered in the past, I think we have gone more granular, given different angles and decompositions of this cost. I would encourage Sam to check for the upcoming MPPF when for sure we're going to have this included.
Guillermo,
Do we
would
have
you
any
have?
other?
Yeah, he said thank you. But he did have another question on slide 8. Adrian, if you could go to slide 8, it might be 8. 2 questions on slide 8. Does the difference between LF and adjusted LF include load conformance? And are economic imports included in the chart?
Okay, so I got distracted with this slide, and I don't think he's referring to this slide. Hey, can you repeat the question, Brenda, please?
Yeah, I think it's slide 9. So it was about the difference between LF and adjusted LF included in the load conformance.
Maybe. Can you read again the please?
Yeah, I said it. Yeah. So does the difference between LF and adjusted LF include load conformance?
If he's referring to the forecast, yes, there are 2 numbers that we refer to typically. One is the standard load forecast, that is just the naturally produced forecast from our systems. And then when we go into the residual unit commitment, the ROC process, generally speaking, we're going to account for the uncertainty that is coming from weather conditions for load, wind, and solar. And that is what we call the ROC adjustment. And that is going to be an adder that we put on top of the standard load forecast to account precisely for that type of uncertainty. That is going to lead to higher levels of the demand that the ROC process has to clear for.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it was slide 10, I believe. Operator, can you check? Yeah, that looks like. Yeah. Awesome. And I think Sam said thank you. I want to make sure he got that.
Okay, is there any other question?
I don't see any other questions, Guillermo, but if anyone has a question, feel free to use the raise hand icon. If not, we will be having this call ending soon, but just want to give a few seconds for folks to unmute themselves or click the raise hand icon. So I don't think there's any questions. So I think we could go ahead and close this call, Guillermo, if that's good with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Guillermo and Amber. We thank so much for what you provided today. As a reference for those who are still on the call, we do have the report and the slides posted on the Summer Market Performance Report under miscellaneous webpage on California ISO. We also have any questions, feel free to send them over to the ISO Stakeholder Affairs at kaiso.com. On the next slide, we also are going to just want to give a shout out on the blog. Adrian, if you could go to the next slide, please. We do post on the energy blog. The one that we just recently posted is about the working with the stakeholders towards significantly reformed interconnection process. So Danielle Mills, who is our principal for the interconnection process policy development with the IPE working groups that have taken off the past few months, her team is working well and provided this article/blog that gives insight on what we're going to do for the 2023 and also in moving forward. So take advantage of that. Those links are here also on the webpage. On the side of the webpage, there's like the blog section, Energy Matters. So other than that, thanks so much everyone for joining. I'll return to Adrian to close our call. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. And that concludes our conference. Thank you for your time. You may now disconnect.